Hello and welcome to another episode of the Knitting Haus Podcast. I'm Claudia and I'm honestly not sure which episode we're on. My guess would be 7. Here's the intro that'll tell you exactly which episode this is. I spent this winter knitting socks, and so I thought I would tell you about the socks that I've been knitting. First though, I want to talk about what I'm wearing right now, and that is the Cozy Classic Raglan jumper by Jessie Maed Designs. You've probably heard of it. It's a classic Raglan design. This is the second one that I have made. The first one was sadly moth dinner, but I'm very happy to say that this one has so far remained uneaten. The yarns I've used for this are both from drops. So as you can tell, I'm striping colours with a black mohair yarn. Let's wait till the cat has finished scratching. So this is a drops baby merino yarn in various colours. As you can see, it's stripy. And it's held double with the drops silk mohair in black. That's why it looks a bit grungy, a bit dirty, but I really like this look. And in fact, I really like this jumper. Minerva, instead of being noisy over there, why don't you come here and be cute? There we go. That's better, isn't it? Yes. One day I will brush you so thoroughly and then spin all your little fluffy cat hairs into a yarn. And then I'll make you a little hat from that. It's very unusual for me to not be working on a jumper at any given time because I really like knitting jumpers. But after earlier in the autumn/winter, I found that most of my jumpers had been attacked by moths. I made a video about that, link down below. After that, I kind of lost the jumper knitting mojo for a bit and instead went really ham on socks. So let me show you what socks I've been knitting. Put them all in a basket. Most of these are made from scraps because I'm someone with smallish feet. Not as small as you might think, considering I'm only 1.52 m, that's 5 foot tall, short. But yeah, I wear a European size 37.5, that's a UK size 4.5. Still not sure what that is in American sizes, quite small. That means that 100 grams of sock yarn goes a really long way for me, which is great because that means I really get a lot out of my sock yarns. So if I make one pair of socks, I will usually have just under 50 grams left. And that's enough to make another pair of socks if I use a contrasting yarn for the cuff and toe. So I started my sock making spree with some fairly basic socks, such as this pair. The other one's in there somewhere. This is a really basic sock. It's not quite a vanilla sock because it is in fact a 3x1 rib. So it's a 1x1 rib cuff and then a 3x1 rib leg and foot. Very classic heel flap and gusset heel, very classic wedge toe. Absolutely nothing interesting about this sock whatsoever. The yarns I used are both from Lana Grossa, and the brown one is, I think, their standard 4-ply sock yarn, and then the oatmeal colour one, beigey one, is of their slightly more luxury, like the merino line or something. I'll find the yarns and link them in the description box. I'm pretty sure these are only available in Europe anyway. Very traditional, some might even say boring, classic, comfortable socks. I use a variety of sock needles, which I will retrieve now because I'm not as well prepared for this video as you might expect. Here they are. And of course, I've already forgotten the brand, but I'll link that in the description box as well. For these socks, I used the smallest pair of circular sock needles I've got. These are 2mm ones, and they have a really long cable. I think this is an 80cm cable. So this is perfect for knitting socks 2 at a time, which I enjoy doing. I don't always knit socks 2 at a time, but for something really simple like this, for something where I don't have to keep track of any color work, like if I don't have to work with 2 yarns at the same time, I quite like knitting them on the 2mm circular needles because it it's a very relaxing knitting experience. You don't have to keep track of rounds, you don't have to count them or anything like that. You can just sort of knit until you feel like you've done enough of a particular part of a sock and then move on to the next bit. And you can be guaranteed that they end up identical, because I'm sure I'm not the only knitter who, when knitting socks one after the other, even with all the rounds being identical, ends up with one sock slightly bigger just due to tension differences. The second sock always ends up slightly more relaxed and therefore slightly bigger. I'm working on it. But there's no danger of that happening with 2 at a time socks, and that's why for really simple ones like this, which is basically vanilla with a little bit of rib. Do you call that French vanilla? Is that like in Magic the Gathering cards, if you have a vanilla with a little bit of extra, you call it French vanilla? Anyway, that's that. They're very comfortable. The nice merino sock yarn is really, really nice to wear. We'll see how it wears in terms of sturdiness. I guess I haven't yet had enough time to try them out, but I like wearing these. I have a lot of cheap, horrible yarn that my mother gifts me. And I'm happy to say that in public, because I know she doesn't watch this video because she doesn't speak English. So no danger there. She likes to gift me yarn, but a lot of the time it's not yarn that I would have necessarily picked out. But when it comes to sock yarn, let's be honest, I don't treat my socks that well. I put them in the washing machine, obviously on a wool wash, 20 degrees, low spin. I'm not a complete barbarian, but I don't baby my socks. For example, I never block them. I have a pair of sock blockers, like wooden ones, that I don't use. I don't block them after washing. I just hang them up on the line, which you're also not supposed to do. So I don't need my sock yarns to be particularly fancy. So this next pair of socks is made from yarn that my mother has given me. And here they are. They are very colourful, which is totally my aesthetic. Honestly though, as much as I am an aficionado of the dark side of the colour palette, I do enjoy a bright colourful sock. It's a nice contrast. This is, again, if I find the name of the yarn, I'll put that in the description box. I need to be better at actually keeping track of these things, I know that. But it's not like you're going to go and buy this, are you? So it's just a very colourful sail-strapping yarn. And another French vanilla sock. Let's go with that. This one is also a rib, and we've got a 4x2 rib, I think. Yeah. So 4 knits, 2 purls throughout the sock. Just gives it a bit more elasticity. Like, it visually, you can't really tell unless you're looking very closely, in which case, why are you looking so closely at my feet, you weirdo? But it gives a little bit more elasticity than just having a plain vanilla sock. The stripes, as always happens on these things, don't entirely match up. You know, you start with the best of intentions and they start off identical, and then at some point it just always goes wrong. And I don't know why, but it's fine. Because again, why are you looking that closely at my feet? These were done on the 2.25 millimeter needles. Same brand as the other ones, which I can't remember, but I will put in the description box. These ones have got a shorter cable. I mean, still decently long to knit magic loop, but not big enough to knit 2 at a time. So these were knitted 1 at a time. The 2.25 millimeter sock needles are my standard ones. I would say most of the socks I'm going to show you are done on those. It's a nice compromise between a sock that has a nice, firm, sturdy fabric at the end. It's not too loose, it's not too soft. So you get a nice, thick, warm and sturdy sock, but it doesn't take quite as long to knit as the 2 millimeter ones. So I'm very fond of the 2.25 millimeter size for sock knitting. In terms of construction, really nothing interesting going on at all. It's a 1x1 rib at the cuff. Then you've got the 2x4 rib throughout and a wedge toe and heel flap and gusset. At the beginning of my sock knitting journey, when I started knitting socks, which I believe was last year or the year before, I tried out different heels, and aesthetically I quite like the short row heel, a German short row heel. It looks nice. It looks like shop bought socks, right? If you buy a pair of socks from a shop, they will have a short row heel. And so visually, I really like that, but it just doesn't fit as well as the heel flap and gusset heel. I have incredibly flat and narrow feet. I've got the type of feet that meant that in the early 2000s, when everyone was wearing ballet flats, I simply couldn't, because my feet would quite literally slip out of them. I cannot wear a standard stiletto heel pump at all because my feet will slip out of there. I need shoes that keep my foot in the shoe. I could go on and on about shoes. I used to work in a shoe shop. I'm very familiar with how shoes fit different types of feet. And now I'm familiarizing myself with how socks fit different types of feet. And the short row heel, as I found, just doesn't hold my foot in well enough. So I use a sort of modified heel flap and gusset heel, because a standard heel flap and gusset heel is too deep in the instep. Like I said, I have incredibly flat feet. So I make the actual heel flap shorter than standard. A normal sock knitting instruction will tell you, for example, if you cast on 60 stitches, to work the heel flap over 30 rows. But I always make it a little bit shorter. So on a 60 stitch heel, I work the heel flap over 26 or 28 rows. And if I do a 56 stitch cast on, then I'll do it over 26 or 24 rows. So I'll make sure that the actual heel flap is shorter than standard, and that makes the instep a little bit narrower as well. And then what I tend to do is I tend to go down in terms of the stitch count for the foot as well. So when I have a 60 stitch leg, then I might go down to 56 stitches for the foot, just so it fits my narrow feet. These are the sort of things that means it's very easy for me to knit socks for myself, because I sort of know what fits, but makes it quite difficult to knit for other people. So I knit 2 pairs of socks for other people in the last few weeks, which, if I'll find pictures, I'm sure I took pictures of them. If I'll find pictures, I will show you. Now, I knit 1 pair of socks for my mum for Christmas, and she has even smaller feet than me. So she wears a size 35 shoe, although she says it's 38. It's not, it's 35. She's literally in children's shoes. That's a UK size, I think 2.5 or something like that. So it's really, really small. And that means that after I knit a pair of shoes, after I knit a pair of socks for her, I quite literally have half a ball of yarn left. I could make 2 pairs of socks for her with a decently long leg on 1 ball of yarn. And for her, I made these socks, which are called, God, I'm so ill prepared for these videos. I'll blend in the name of the pattern as well. It's a free pattern that I'll link down below. I'm not well prepared, but let me tell you, I put the work in when it comes to editing and filling the description box with description. So I downloaded this pattern. It's got a really cute honeycomb type thing going on. It's an interesting texture. It's all done by doing 2-stitch cables. And 2-stitch cables and 3-stitch cables are the types I can do without a cable needle, or I can do safely without a cable needle, without having to worry every time that everything's going to fall apart. So it basically took me no time at all to make these. They were fun to do. It's a pattern that's both easy to memorize, easy to do, and interesting enough to keep my attention. I expect I'll be doing another pair of these for myself at some point, because I really like the look of them. So after I did some of these French vanilla socks, I wanted to experiment a bit. So I did what any new knitter does when they want to experiment a bit. And I went onto Stitch Fiddle and had a fiddle with some stitches. So I started by doing some really basic cable socks. Doing the socks for Mum really got me onto a bit of a cable thing. And I made these. So these are made from the same brown yarn that I used for the cuffs and toes of this one. And this is a really very basic cable pattern. So you've got Just a variety of 2 and 3 stitch cables, alternating with columns of pearls. And as you can see, it makes a very elasticated leg. That means that this sock fits really well around my leg. This does not slip. This is just a really good fit. The cables, they're not super visible on the this greyish brown, but they add a bit of interest. And again, these are all 2 and 3 stitch cables, which means I did them without a cable needle. I really like these. These were super easy to do. Again, the construction for the heel flap and toe is exactly as I've explained earlier. So I make a slightly shorter heel flap and a very standard wedge toe. And these were knit on the trusted 2.25mm sock needles. Cable once with magic loop. There's the other one, just in case you doubted that I actually made 2. After this, I got a little more experimental and I made another pair of cable socks. These ones. Again, you'll recognize the yarn because it's the same yarn I used for these ones. Like I said, you've got small feet, you can reuse yarn over and over and over again. And here's a spoiler, there is a third pair of socks that I managed to get out of this yarn, so quite pleased with that. These socks have got a somewhat more complex pattern. Again, one I drafted myself on Stitch Fiddle. Nothing ridiculously designer out there. The back of the leg is a rib, I guess. It's not a regular rib. It is symmetrical, but it's like, it sort of goes 2 knits, 2 pearls, 3 knits, 2 pearls, 2 knits, 1 pearl, knit, pearl. I don't know why I made it that complicated, I guess just for the sake of symmetry. Anyway, at the front, I've got a pattern of cables and seed stitch. Yes, you can see cable going down here and on the other side with individual single stitch columns of pearls. Then you've got a bit of moss stitch here and then another cable in the middle. Quite pleased with that. I think, again, adds a bit of interest, and this pale oatmeal colour really does show the rib and the seed stitch and the cables quite well. I also really enjoyed designing these little cable patterns, and I'm going to try and do more of that going forward. Maybe doing some complicated things like a 4-stitch cable. Getting ambitious here. Maybe some of the cables that like interlace and things like that. I'll probably have to watch a few videos on the topic, but I can see myself playing with that a little bit more in the future. After I made that pair, I made a pair of similar cable socks for a friend's birthday. And she has bigger feet than me, so I had to consult a chart to try and figure out a size. I hope they fit. I made that from another Lana Grossa yarn. I just really like their sock yarns. I'm a fan. And this is a teal coloured tweed yarn that I thought looked really pretty. And I knitted that up on the 2.25mm needles as well. After I made that pair of socks, I made another one for myself. And at that point I was getting a little bit bored of cables. I know, don't tell them. I wanted to try my hand at some colour work. So I once again jumped onto Stitch Fiddle and designed this. The yarn used was the leftovers from these socks, which, if you remember, was a crappy sock yarn gifted to me by my mum, and a black yarn, which was also a crappy sock yarn gifted by my mum, which resulted in a sock that's kind of not great in terms of quality. All of these sock yarns, by the way, are very similar in composition. They're wool or merino with your standard 20-25% nylon. And these are no different, so they are still wool and nylon sock yarn. But this black yarn is horrible, very splitty, doesn't feel great, like feels kind of slippery, not in a good way. Hello again. If the framing is slightly different. That's because I just had to deal with a cat-related emergency of the digestive kind. Lovely stuff. Anyway, what was I talking about? Yes, these socks. The sock yarn itself is a bit horrible, but you don't look a gift sock yarn in the... I came up with this pattern myself. It's not particularly complicated. It's just a really basic stranded colorwork design that I thought would look good on this black and self-striping sock yarn. As you can tell, my tension when it comes to colorwork isn't great. That's definitely something I still have to learn. But it's a sock. No one's going to look that closely. Also because this is a self-striping yarn and I didn't have loads of it left, you get different color stripes on each of the socks. So this one is like, green, red and yellow. And then this one starts with the green and then it's got a bit of grey and a bit of blue and stuff. So it's from different parts of the ball of yarn, but I still think they came out quite nice. For the toe, I also tried to do a bit of color work, but here it is just a single row stripes. So alternating between the colorful yarn and the black yarn. I didn't bother with like a jogless thingy or anything like that because this is at the bottom of the foot, so literally no one's going to see it. Overall, I'm quite pleased. I'm kind of glad I practiced color work with yarn that didn't really matter to me. I still think the result is kind of cool, came out quite well. Even if it's not going to be the nicest sock I've made, I certainly need to improve my tension when it comes to stranded color work. I knit continental style because I am continental style, and that means that I've got 2 yarns over my left index finger and tensioning those. I still haven't quite got the hang of that, but practice makes perfect, and so we'll keep going. I wasn't done with my colorwork phase yet, and so I made another kind of similar looking colorwork sock. For this one, I used the yarn that was left over from the gift knit for my friend. So you've got this really cute teal, what do you call it? Tweed? Teal tweed sock yarn, also from Lana Grossa, and a yellow sock yarn, also from Lana Grossa. So this is nicer yarn than this. Both yarns quite soft but sturdy. Both of them are sheep wool based. And the design for this one is a lot simpler than the other one. It's just I think a 20 row colorwork pattern that I came up with. Let's see if I can center it so you can see it. There you go. Very, very simple. Absolutely nothing complicated about it. Same in the front and back. And this is what it looks like from the side. Once again, you can see where the magic loop loops, that it's not tensioned that well. But overall, I'm doing a better job here than I did on this one. And that's just due to practice. Both colorwork socks I made on these sock needles. And these are 2.5 millimeter sock needles. So this is the largest size I will use for socks. I know some people use 2.75 millimeters, but I think these ones do just fine for a standard 4-ply sock yarn when doing color work. When doing color work, you're supposed to use slightly larger needles just so that you don't tense too high. That's not a word. That you don't tension too high. That your tension isn't too high. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so I think these came out really well. Because I used the larger sock needles, the actual fabric is more floppy, more soft. Then it comes out with the 2.25 millimeter or indeed the 2 millimeter sock needles. So it's not as sturdy as a sock, but still very comfortable, very warm, very wearable, and the color work, I think, came out quite nice. At this point in my sock making journey, I'm bored with Stitch Fiddle. Sorry, Stitch Fiddle, I'm over you. That's not true. I'll never be over Stitch Fiddle. But the next pair of socks I wanted to make was going to be something to use up my remaining scrap yarn. And that's what I did. This is the final pair I want to show you today. And these are, as you can see, quite long in the leg. I wanted to have another pair to wear under my really thick winter boots. And if I may say so myself, considering these are scrap, I think the colours are quite cohesive. So there is 4 different yarns in this sock. Let's start. The cuff is made from the oatmeal and merino socks. Then the leg and the toe are made from another Lana Grossa yarn that is yak based. I can't remember exactly what percentage of yak fibers in there, but some of it is yak fiber. I really like that yarn. I'll definitely buy it again. This is a self-striping yarn, as you can see, so it goes through various shades of brown, orange, yellow, pink. I really like this. I really like the look of it. And then the heel flap is made from tiny, tiny, tiny amounts of the Drops alpaca sock yarn, which I think is Drops Nord. Really, this is the worst kind of sock yarn to use for a heel because alpaca yarn is famously soft and airy, not sturdy and thick as you want for a sock yarn. But I had tiny amounts of this grey yarn left, and so I used it for the heel. The foot is made from the same brown yarn that I used for the sock that I showed you earlier. And this is another Lana Grossa basic sock yarn. And then the toe is made from the same yak fiber as the leg. So we've got 4 different yarns, 3 different animals, all making what I think of is quite a well matched sock overall. These ones I made on the 2mm long cable needles. So that's this one here. Firstly, because they are a plain vanilla sock, so there's absolutely no patterning going on here. Not even a cheeky little rib, nothing like that. It is a true vanilla sock. And because I was working with scraps, I wanted to make sure that I was really making the most of the yarn that I had. So I made the cuffs as long as possible. I made the leg as long as possible. I made sure that I used as much of the yarn as I had to really get the most out of scraps. And I'm really, really happy with how they turned out. Because I made these on the smallest sock needles, on the 2mm ones, it took a little bit to get through. But the end result is a nice, thick fabric, a sturdy sock that's still very soft, very wearable, and that I'm quite pleased with. So those were the socks I made this winter. I only bought 2 new balls of yarn, and both of them were for gift knits. So I bought the teal yarn for the gift knit for my friend, and then I bought a self-strapping yarn for the gift knit for my mum. And because my mum's got such small feet, I still have about 50 grams of that self-strapping yarn left. So before the season's over, there's going to be at least 1 more pair of socks. I haven't yet decided. I might draft another little pattern again, maybe trim-handed lace, I don't know. Or I'll find a pattern to purchase or to download. Either way, my sock knitting for this year isn't entirely over yet, but I'm really pleased with the amount that I've added to my sock collection. Since the Great Moth Plague of 2023, I unfortunately lost 2 or 3 pairs of socks. Only one of them actually to moth damage. The other pairs were all ruined in the wash because I don't want to say I had a meltdown, but I did put the socks in the wash at 60 degrees and not many survived. But now I have a whole big pile of socks, which means that I can once again wear homemade socks pretty much every day in the winter. And because, as I said, I don't baby them, I do put them in the washing machine on a 20-degree low spin cycle. with wool wash, don't you worry. Because of that, I'm quite happy to wear hand knitted socks every day. So there's only one thing left to do before I finish this podcast, and that is to show you my current knit. I'm still not knitting a jumper, but I have picked up my project that I sort of put aside a few months ago, and that is what's going to be a vest by Fabel Knitwear. Honestly, I should actually write these things down before I record. Link in the description box. I think it's called the Gondor vest by Fabel Knitwear, which is a 1x1 rib vest. And it's knit on 3.5mm needles. So it's going to take a little while for this to actually become a vest. We'll see if I get there before it gets warm, hopefully, because then I can actually wear it. The yarns I'm using for that are a black lace weight silk and merino blend by, I can't remember, and this, which is I think a Rowan tweed. All the information is going to be in the description box. I wasn't planning on doubling up on yarns for this vest, but the Rowan tweed, which by the way I bought for like €1 in a charity shop, so it's not a great waste of money or anything, but the Rowan tweed is so brittle that if I knit it by itself, it keeps breaking, and therefore I'm using it with that silk merino. Did I say mohair earlier? I meant merino. Silk merino blend, just to give it a bit of body. Once it's knit, brittle yarns are usually fine. They don't break once they're knit up, but they are fragile to work with during the actual knitting process. And so I'm just combining it with the black yarn. Makes it a bit darker, but if you know me, you know that I don't mind that at all. That was it for today. I don't know when the next episode is going to be out, but presumably once I've got some more knitting to talk about. Thank you for watching. Bye.